Now.
Now. Oh, hello, Chief Whip. Are you number 12? Well, the Prime Minister wants to see you urgently.
Now.
Now! Thank you. Sir Humphrey.
Oh, yes, Bernard.
I'm very troubled by what I've just learned.
What is that?
Well, I feel as if I've been walking about with my eyes shut. I never realised that there was a cabinet plot against the Prime Minister.
Is there? How interesting.
But you said there was.
I said nothing, Bernard, nothing at all.
You mean, oh. Well, do you know if there is a plot?
No?
No, there isn't, or no, you don't know?
Yes.
Sir Humphrey, what exactly has the Employment Secretary done?
Nothing as yet, Bernard, and we must keep it that way.
But isn't his plan rather a good one?
For whom?
The country.
That is hardly the point.
Why not?
Bernard, when you move on from here, where do you plan to go?
Well, I don't know.
Well, how would you like to be Deputy Secretary in charge of Defence Procurement?
Oh, gosh.
In Sunderland, or Berwick-on-Tweed, or Lossiemouth?
Is that a place?
Lossiemouth, what do you think it was?
A dog food.
Well, if the Employment Secretary has his way, you may get a 3-year diet of Lossiemouth yourself, you see?
Crikey, yes.
So how can it be good for the country?
Well, it couldn't possibly. But why did you suggest sending for the Chief Whip? To confirm a plot that doesn't exist?
Because he's bound to hedge. The Chief Whip cannot categorically state that there's no plot against the Prime Minister, just in case there is. He has to cover himself. Oh, good morning, Chief Whip.
Good morning. Could you wait in the private office?
Certainly. Bernard? Now, go in there and inform me of their conversation.
Well, I'm not sure I can do that, Sir Humphrey. It might be confidential.
Bernard, the matter at issue is the defence of the realm and the stability of the government.
But you only need to know things on a need-to-know basis.
I need to know everything. How else can I judge whether or not I need to know it?
So that means you need to know things even when you don't need to know them. You need to know them not because you need to know them, but because you need to know whether or not you need to know. And if you don't need to know, you still need to know so that you know that there was no need to know.
Yes.
Good. That's very clear. Chief Whip, Prime Minister.
Morning, Prime Minister.
How are things going, Chief Whip?
Oh, quite well, really. Why?
I mean, you've noticed nothing?
Well, it's a difficult time. A bit of unrest on the back benches. What did you have in mind, precisely?
A plot? A leadership challenge?
Ah. Yes. Well, actually, I have no real evidence of anything.
But you have suspicions.
Oh, I always have suspicion.
How far has it gone?
Only a very
Early stage?
early stage. As far as one can tell.
Do you think you ought to have a word with him? Tell him I know what's going on. I don't want to lose him from the cabinet. I just want him under control.
Perhaps you should have a word with him yourself.
No, not at this stage. Who else is involved?
Apart from
Apart from Dudley, obviously.
Dudley? Yes, of course, apart from Dudley. Well, apart from Dudley... Well, it's a bit early to say. I mean, there may be nothing in it.
Geoffrey, I'm not taking any risks.
No, absolutely not. Now, I'll go and make a few more inquiries.
Prime Minister, this proposal to send defence establishments up to the north is bound to be leaked to the press, isn't it?
Oh, bound to be.
Well, if it were leaked as the Employment Secretary's plan, I agree it would confirm your suspicions, but I'm sure it will go out as a government plan.
I'm not.
Ah, the evening paper.
God! Look! Swine! There's your proof, Humphrey.
Good heavens, I'm astonished.
Sources in Whitehall report that this imaginative plan, an initiative by the Secretary of State for Employment, has been blocked by the Prime Minister. How dare he? Dare he? I'm
Speechless.
Speechless. I backed him all along the line. I fought for this soddy little plan of his. I gave him his first cabinet post. I've treated him like a son. This is the thanks I get.
How sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless cabinet colleague.
It's envy, you know. Dudley is consumed with envy.
It's one of the 7 Dudley sins.
Yes, thank you. Prime Minister, shall we start to draft your letter accepting his resignation?
Well, it's not as simple as that. He'll deny that he leaked, so why am I sacking him? Besides, he's even more dangerous on the back benches than he is as a minister. A sacked minister doesn't even have to pretend to be loyal.
So you mean you'll go ahead with his plan?
No, I can't. Not now. It'll look as though he's defeated me. I can't risk that. It's a good plan. So, perhaps... no, I...
Prime Minister, you're not being indecisive, are you?
No. No, I just can't make up my mind.
Well, perhaps I can help.
How?
Well, technically, of course, I shouldn't be showing you this.
Why not? I'm Prime Minister, aren't I?
Indeed you are. That's why I shouldn't be showing it to you. It's a Ministry of Defence draft internal paper. The Secretary of Defence hasn't seen it yet. But as you will see, it casts grave doubts on the Employment Secretary's plan.
Does it?
It points out that many of the valuable buildings he quotes can't in practice be sold. Some are listed. Some have strict planning controls. The cost of the move would be prohibitive. It would create massive unemployment in the home counties and East Anglia. And in Part 3, there are pages and pages of objections on the grounds of military strategy.
And all this is absolutely honest and accurate?
It comes from the Ministry of Defence.
Even so, it could be honest and accurate. You know, I think the public has a right to know this.
It is a top-secret document. On the other hand, the service chiefs are notorious for their indiscretion.
Notorious.
It could well find its way into the hands of some irresponsible journalist.
Quite. Or several irresponsible.
Several indeed.
Of course, I could never be a party to anything like that.
Certainly not. So, Prime Minister, shall we defer further discussion of the Employment Secretary's plan to an unspecified future date?
Yeah, let's drop it.
Prime Minister, meanwhile, I'll go and attend to the plumbing.
When's he going to leak it?
Did I ask for a leak, Bernard?
Well, not in so many... No, you didn't.
No, I didn't. I occasionally have confidential press briefings, but I have never leaked.
Oh, that's another of those irregular verbs, isn't it? I give confidential press briefings, you leak. He's been charged under Section 2A of the Official Secrets Act. Sir Humphrey,
Yes, Bernard.
have you got a moment?
Yes, Bernard.
I've got a problem.
Yes, Bernard.
You know?
Yes, Bernard.
How?
Because you've just told me, Bernard.
I mean, do you know what my problem is?
Your problem is, Bernard, that you don't ever come to the point.
Yes, sorry. Well, the Prime Minister has just had lunch with Derek Burnham, the editor of...
Yes, I know he is, Bernard.
Yes, and the Prime Minister told him that the minutes of Cabinet Committee confirm that he didn't try to suppress Chapter 8 of the book, and that he would publish them if necessary to prove that he didn't.
So what is your problem?
Well, the minutes aren't written yet.
I see.
So, what should I do?
Write them, dear Bernard.
Yes, well, the problem is the Prime Minister did try to suppress the chapter, didn't he?
I don't know, did he?
Well, didn't he? Don't you remember?
What I remember is irrelevant, Bernard. If the minutes don't say that he did, then he didn't.
So you want me to falsify the minutes?
I want nothing of the sort. It's up to you, Bernard. What do you want?
I want to have a clear conscience.
A clear conscience.
Yes.
When did you acquire this taste for luxuries? Consciences are for politicians, Bernard. We are humble functionaries whose duty it is to implement the commands of our democratically elected representatives. How could we possibly be doing anything wrong if it is being commanded by those who represent the people?
Well, I can't accept that, Sir Humphrey. No man is an island.
I agree, Bernard. No man is an island, entire of itself. and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee, Bernard.
So what do you suggest, Sir Humphrey?
Bernard, the minutes do not record everything that was said at a meeting, do they?
Well, no, of course not.
And people change their minds during a meeting, don't they?
Well, yes.
So the actual meeting is a massive ingredients for you to choose from.
Oh, like cooking.
No, not like cooking. Better not to use that word in connection with books on minutes. You choose from a jumble of ill-digested ideas, a version which represents the Prime Minister's views as he would, on reflection, have liked them to emerge.
But if it's not a true record...
The purpose of minutes is not to record events, it is to protect people. You do not take notes if the Prime Minister says something he did not mean to say, particularly if it contradicts something he has said publicly. You try to improve on what has been said, put it in a better order. You are tactful.
But how do I justify that?
You are his servant.
Oh, yes.
A minute is a note for the records and a statement of action, if any, that was agreed upon. Now, what happened at the meeting in question?
Well, the book was discussed, and the Solicitor General advised there were no legal grounds for suppressing it.
And did the Prime Minister accept what the Solicitor General had said?
Well, he accepted the fact there were no legal grounds for suppression, but...
He accepted the fact that there were no legal grounds for suppression. You see?
Oh.
Is that a lie?
No.
Can you write it in the minutes?
Yes.
How is your conscience?
Much better, thank you, sir.
Yes, Bernard?
Have you got a moment?
Yes, Bernard.
I've got a problem.
Get on with it, Bernard.
Yes, well, it's just that, I've just been interviewed by the press.
You gave an interview?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Well, that's not your job.
Well, I know, I couldn't help it. It just happened. They just trapped me into speaking to them.
What did you say?
Nothing, really.
Well, what's your problem?
Well, they were asking me about you.
What about me?
About you and the Official Secrets Act.
And?
Whether you were bound by it.
Of course I'm bound.
Yes, of course you are. But it might not come out like that.
What do you mean?
Well, thinking back on what I said and what they said, and what I said you said, or what they may say I said you said, or what they may have thought I said I thought you thought. Well, they may say I said, I thought you said, you thought...
Go on, Bernard.
Well, I think I said you thought you were above the law.
You said that.
Well, not intentionally. That's just the way it came out. I'm terribly sorry. They were just asking me all these questions.
Bernard, just because people ask you questions, what makes you think you have to answer them?
Well, I don't know.
You've never answered my questions just because I asked
I know.
you. After a lifetime in the civil service, an entire career devoted to avoiding questions, you suddenly decide to answer them today, and to the press, you must have flipped your lid, Bernard.
Please don't shout at me, Prime Minister. I assure you I won't answer any more questions ever again.
Get Humphrey and Bill in here.
Will you send Sir Humphrey in, please, and Bill Pritchard?
And if this question should ever arise again, Bernard, this is how you deal with questions. If you have nothing to say nothing. Better still, have something to say and say it, no matter what they ask. Pay no attention to the question, just make your own statement. And then if they ask the question again, what you say is, that's not the question, or I think the real question is, and then you make another statement of your own. Well, how's that leak inquiry coming on?
Well, Prime Minister, the wheels will be turning very soon.
Very soon. I asked you a week ago. What's the matter with you two?
Sorry, Prime Minister, I had no idea you were serious. Leak inquiries are not usually pursued.
Well, I want this one pursued. Rigorously and immediately.
Rigorously?
And immediately.
Immediately?
Immediately.
Oh. What? Do Do you mean you really want it pursued?
What's the lips move, Humphrey? I want it pursued. Now.
Very well, Prime Minister, if you're serious, I will arrange a genuine arm's-length inquiry if that's what you really want. I'll get Inspector Plod of the Special Branch.
Thanks. Now we have to do something to improve our relations with the press, which have deteriorated considerably today. Since my esteemed private secretary saw fit to tell them that I felt myself to be above the law when it came to official secrets. Yes, you may well hang your head, Bernard.
Yes, I've spoken to the Home Office. They say there's no possible grounds to pass an Act of Parliament to allow this particular dog into Britain. I know an enabling act can enable anything, but the Prime Minister feels it would merely enable him to lose the next election.
Have you thought about turning the whole of Buckingham Palace into a quarantine zone for dogs?
Are you serious?
Just a thought.
What about the corgis?
Oh.
Hang on. Graham, phone the palace now and check that Her Majesty's not been told officially that this gift has been proposed. Then she can't be implicated in refusing it, yes. Yes, we will want simultaneous translators. No, not when the PM meets the leaders of the English-speaking nations. Yes, the English-speaking nations can be said to include the United States. A certain generosity of spirit. Sorry, I've got to go. Yes, there are about 10 Prime Ministers flying in today. Special Branch are going crazy. So is the band of the Royal Marines, who've got to play all the national anthems. Oh, I see, thanks. Argentina's not coming, that's a bit of luck.
Because of the Falklands?
No, because their anthem goes on for about 6 minutes. Look, I know you're worried about this dog. I'm worried about it too. Look, talk to our ambassador in Paris, see if he can think of a way to nobble it. Well, you know, slip it something. See if the Bulgarians have got any spare umbrella tips.
But there is one possibility. Make Buckingham Palace notionally an extension of the French embassy. Then the dog would still be on foreign territory.
Peter, the PM is fighting for the sovereignty of the Channel Tunnel. How do you think he feels about the sovereignty of Buck House? How do you think the sovereign feels about the sovereignty of Buck House? Yes. No, we can't have alphabetical seating in the Abbey. You'd have Iraq and Iran next to each other. Plus Israel and Jordan all sitting in the same pew. Would be in danger of starting World War III. I know Ireland begins with an I, but no. Ireland doesn't make it any better. Ireland doesn't make anything any better. And by the way, make sure everyone knows if the papal envoy says we desire to wash our hands, it means he wants to go and have a pee. Yes, a royal wee. Followed by a royal flush. Oh, and watch out for these South Africans.
Problems with human rights?
No, they're trying to unload more grapefruit.
Bernard, the palace wants to know if there's a problem about the red carpets, and Her Majesty is worried that the President of the Ivory Coast wishes to award her with the Order of the Elephant.
Hang on. Graham, we can't have another animal, especially an elephant. The whole of Whitehall, the Home Office, Foreign Office, Cabinet Office, the DHSS, we've all been tied up with one puppy for nearly a week. Government's been paralysed. No elephants. No, the correct mode of address to a Cypriot archbishop is not your ecstasy, it's your beatitude. For God's sake, yes, what is it? Oh, sorry, Prime Minister. I'll come in straight away.
What on earth is that, Bernard?
Oh, it's the Channel Tunnel file, Prime Minister.
No, the other one.
That's the puppy file.
Where have we got to with that?
Well, it weighed in at 3.5 pounds this morning.
The puppy?
No, the file.
No, but what's happening?
Well, at the moment, we've told the French that airport security will reluctantly have to impound the puppy and keep it in quarantine at Heathrow.
What do they say?
Well, they haven't replied yet. We did point out it was on the route from Buckingham Palace to Windsor, so the Queen will be able to visit it on the way.
Can you visit quarantine dogs?
Well, if she can't, she can sort of wave to it as she drives down the M.
What do you think they're going to do?
Well, I presume they'll threaten to publish the story if we don't give in on the Channel Tunnel.
Prime Minister, forgive me. I have urgent news.
I hope it's good news.
Well, yes and no. The police have just found a bomb in the grounds of the French embassy.
What? Who put it there?
Well, we don't know yet. Lots of people could have a motive.
Yeah, me for a start. Prime Minister, you need to see this security file immediately.
Not now, Bernard. I'm about to talk to the French president.
Yes, but you should see this file first.
That bomb in the French embassy, Prime Minister, it was planted there by the French police.
You're not serious. Why?
Oh, to see if they could catch us out, to prove our security inefficient.
Smuggling explosives into the UK illegally?
That's correct.
Have you got proof of this?
We found a matching detonator in their hotel. They've confessed.
This is wonderful. Humphrey, give me 2 minutes alone with the President, and then when I give you a signal, bring that file in.
Right. Oh, Prime Minister, what will the signal be?
I'm so sorry, Monsieur le Président. I'm sure he's just coming.
Monsieur le Président. The tunnel.
The tunnel, indeed. But first of all, can we clear up this silly misunderstanding about the little puppy which I am presenting as a return gift to Her Majesty tomorrow?
There's no misunderstanding. I'm very sorry, but I can't ask the Queen to break the law.
I do not want the Queen to break the law. I merely ask the Prime Minister to bend it.
I'm deeply sorry, if I possibly could.
If the French people learn of this rejection, a national slap in the face.
The tunnel.
The tunnel. But you make it very difficult for me. The French people will not accept a second slap in the face. And you are rejecting our very reasonable proposal for French sovereignty as far as Dover. However, setting that to one side, there is the question of which shall be la langue de préférence, the first language.
Sir Humphrey, I have just seen this order of service for tomorrow. It is deeply embarrassing. This him.
On Jordan's bank, the Baptists cry.
Why? Don't you know the Jordan Bank went bust yesterday?
But surely, if we have half the signs in French first and half the signs in English, that's fair.
It's not logical.
Does logic matter?
Does law matter?
Oh, yes. Britain is the only country in Europe still free of rabies.
I'm so sorry. The Bernard will handle this for you. Bernard, excuse me. Monsieur le Président, will you please forgive me? Prime Minister, I think you ought to see this urgently.
No, I don't believe it. Mr. President, I shall have to ask you to explain this. You need hardly say how grave this matter is.
Prime Minister, I must ask you to believe that I had no knowledge of this.
An attempt by a guest to deceive Her Majesty's government? Illegally smuggling explosives into the UK?
But you must know that the French government never knows what French security are doing.
You mean you're not able to take responsibility for them?
No, that's not what I mean, but if this report is true, I must ask you to accept my profound regrets.
It's true enough, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you. You see, it makes it so difficult for the Prime Minister over the Channel Tunnel.
When news of this bomb is published, the British people will want to make very few concessions.
They won't know whether it's safe to go through.
It could be full of official French bombs.
Absolutely.
Of course, in the interests of Anglo-French friendship, we could perhaps overlook the crimes of your security men.
I suppose sovereignty halfway across?
I'll just write that down, if I may.
Half the signs in English first and the starting ceremony in 2 months in Dover.
Morning, Prime Minister. Is it the newspapers?
Yes. They all say that since my administration came into office, nothing has changed.
You must be very proud.
That's not meant as a compliment, Bernard. I read all 10 of this morning's London newspapers. There's not a good word about me in 9 of them.
But the 10th is better.
10th is worse, doesn't mention me at all.
What have they got against you this morning?
Well, basically they all say the same thing. That I'm a windbag.
Good heavens.
Yeah. Extraordinary, isn't it? They say that my administration's all rhetoric, that I talk and talk, but nothing ever gets done. Simply isn't true. There are many reforms in the pipeline, great new change of direction, great new schemes of development, a whole new philosophy of government, profound change in the whole social fabric and geopolitical climate of this country.
So, what is actually happening?
Nothing yet, obviously.
Oh, that'll be Sir Humphrey.
Let us send him in.
Sir Humphrey. I suppose the origin of this criticism is this rumour about another big scandal in the city.
How did you guess? Oh, Humphrey, I've decided to respond to all this criticism about a scandal in the city. The press is demanding action.
What are you proposing to do?
I shall appoint someone.
And when did you take this momentous decision?
Today, when I read the papers.
But when did you first think of it?
Today, when I read the papers.
And for how long, may I ask, did you weigh the pros and cons of this decision?
Not long, I decided to be decisive.
Prime Minister, if I may say, I think you worry too much about what the papers say.
Only a civil servant could have made that remark, Bernard. I have to worry about them, particularly with the party conference coming up. These rumours of a scandal just won't go away, you know.
Well, let's not worry about it until it becomes something more than a rumour. I'd just like to show you the cabinet agenda.
No, not just now, Humphrey. This is rather more important.
With respect, Prime Minister, it is not. The only way to understand the press is to remember that they pander to their readers' prejudices.
Don't tell me about the press. I know exactly who reads the papers. The Daily Mirror is read by people who think they run the country. The Guardian is read by people who think they ought to run the country. The Times is read by the people who actually do run the country. The Daily Mail is read by the wives of the people who run the country. The Financial Times is read by people who own the country. The Morning Star is read by people who think the country ought to be run by another country. And the Daily Telegraph is read by people who think it is.
And Prime Minister, what about the people who read The Sun?
Sun readers don't care who runs the country as long as she's got big tits.
Yes.
Sir Humphrey, the Prime Minister wonders if you could join him in 5 minutes.
Yes, certainly, Bernard. Bernard,
Yes.
any news yet about the governorship of the Bank of England?
Well, the Prime Minister is planning to appoint Alexander Jameson, Mr. Clean. So that's one bit of good news.
It's appalling news.
Oh, are you going to try and change the Prime Minister's mind?
No, I'm going to change the Prime Minister's mind.
Well, he seems very keen on him.
I know, so that'll be my starting point. When you wish to suggest that somebody is perhaps not the ideal choice,
You rubbish them?
the first stage is to express absolute support.
Why?
Because you don't want to go on record as saying somebody is no good. You must be seen to be their friend. After all, it is necessary to get behind someone before you can stab them in the back.
But Alexander Jameson is good. He's extremely honest and efficient.
Excellent. So that's the second stage. You list all his praiseworthy qualities, especially those that make him unsuitable for the job. And then you praise them to the point where they become a vice. That's the third stage. Or, better still, you oversimplify his views by labeling them, as you just did.
You mean Mr. Clean?
Yes. But I think we can do better than that. Do sit down, Bernard. Now, isn't he a churchgoer?
Yes, I believe he was once a lay preacher, a long time ago.
Splendid news. We can certainly use that against him. What a charming man. Hasn't an enemy in the world. But is he really up to dealing with some of those rogues in the city?
Well, that won't wash. Jameson's pretty tough.
Then we'll say he's too tough. That's the fourth stage. You name all his bad points by defending and excusing them. You know, it probably doesn't matter that he was a conscientious objector. I'm sure that nobody's really questioned his patriotism. Or I think the criticisms of him for bankrupting his last company weren't entirely fair.
Well, that would certainly do it.
Well, if it doesn't, you can always hint at a hidden scandal. If he's not married, hint at homosexuality.
If he is married?
Adultery. With a lady who is beyond reproach, one of the royals, for instance. Or a television newsreader.
Well, what if he's obviously happily married?
Well, then say he's extremely puritanical, or he drinks, or he's having psychiatric treatment. Really, Bernard, the possibilities are endless. Listen and learn, Bernard.
Yeah. Sir Humphrey?
Oh, my dear lady, how very nice to meet you. Do come in. Now, won't you come and sit down? Now... right. Would you get Miss Morehouse a cup of tea? Or is it Mrs. Morehouse?
Is my marital status really your concern?
No. It's just that I was just really worried about whether the... would you get, her a cup of tea? Now, what should I call you, Mrs. Morehouse?
You can call me Agnes. What
Agnes.
shall I call you?
You can call me Sir Humphrey. My dear lady.
I'm not your dear lady. Don't patronise me and cut out the sexist crap, okay?
Okay, Agnes. Now, the reason I wanted us to have this little meeting was because I wanted us to try and understand one another. Basically, I'm sure we're in agreement.
Really?
Yeah, well, obviously you have your own views about how Britain should be run, but I'm sure we agree on a fundamental basis of order and authority.
That's half true.
Half true.
You agree, I don't.
But it's obvious.
It's obvious if you've got it made under the present system, then you want to use authority to preserve your privileges. But what about the homeless? What about the unemployed? What about the poor people?
Oh, yes, I know all about them.
Really? What do you know?
Well, I've read all the published papers. I've seen all the statistics. I've read all the official reports. Believe me, dearly, Agnes, dear, I do know all about them.
Fine. What does half a pound of margarine cost? What does half a pound of margarine cost?
Oh, how should I know? 20p.
20p?
Well, £2.40, I don't know.
Right. Why should you? What time do Social Security offices open?
What are the idea?
How long can you run a one-bar fire with 50 pence in the meter?
I'm not entirely sure I follow.
Of course you don't. If you knew that sort of thing, you wouldn't agree about using authority to support the system.
Look, I do understand. I do sympathise. It'd be marvellous if there was no poverty, but we just don't have the resources to achieve that.
Who hasn't?
The nation.
Really? Does this desk belong to the nation? This china?
Porcelain.
These portraits? Or are they your own?
Of course not, the government property.
Oh, good. They should fetch about, what, 80,000? That should keep 20-odd one-parent families for a year. Then what about your salary?
That has nothing to do with it.
Good. Then we'll have that, too. Leave you £100 a week. That's 70,000 a year for the needy.
Look, my salary is merely part of a complex economic structure.
Good. We'll simplify it. After all, you don't want to make a profit out of serving your country, do you?
Tea. Over here, I think. Very nice. Thank you so much. Shall I be mother? Yeah. Tell me, Agnes, this policy of yours of only allowing free-range eggs to be sold in your borough, how does this help poverty?
Animals have rights too, you know. A battery chicken's life isn't worth living. Would you want to spend your life packed in with 600 other desperate, squawking, smelly creatures, unable to breathe fresh air, unable to move, unable to stretch, unable to think?
Certainly not. That's why I never stood for Parliament. Bernard, I want to have a word with you about Professor Marriott's article.
Yes, I think it's about time we reform local government.
Do you, Bernard?
Yes. At least I think I did. That is, I'm not wholly against it. Although there are many convincing, some might say conclusive arguments against it.
Some might indeed, Bernard.
Yes. Why?
Because, Bernard, once you create genuinely democratic local communities, it won't stop there.
Won't it?
Well, of course it won't. You see, once they get established, they'll insist on more power. And the politicians will be too frightened to withhold them, so you'll get regional government.
Would that matter?
Bernard's going to sit down. Bernard, what happens at the moment if there is some vacant land in, say, Nottingham, and there are rival proposals for its use? You know, a hospital, a college, or an airport.
Well, we set up an interdepartmental committee. Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Transport, Treasury, Environment. Ask for papers, hold meetings, propose, discuss, revise, report back, redraft, a normal thing.
Precisely. Months of fruitful work. Leading to a mature and responsible conclusion. But if you have regional government, they decide it all in Nottingham. Probably in a couple of meetings, complete amateurs.
It is their city.
And what happens to us?
Well, much less work.
Yes, much less work. So little that ministers might almost be able to do it on their own. So we'd have much less power.
Well, I don't know whether I really want power.
Bernard, if the right people don't have power, do you know what happens? The wrong people get it. Politicians, councillors, ordinary voters.
But aren't they supposed to in a democracy?
This is a British democracy, Bernard.
How do you mean?
British democracy recognizes that you need a system to protect the important things of life and keep them out of the hands of the barbarians. Things like the opera, Radio 3, the countryside, the law, the universities, both of them. And we are that system. Gosh. We run a civilized, aristocratic government machine tempered by occasional general elections. Since 1832, we have been gradually excluding the voter from government. Now, we've got them to a point where they just vote once every 5 years for which bunch of buffoons will try to interfere with our policies, and you are happy to see all that thrown away.
No, I didn't mean...
Bernard, do you want the Lake District turned into a gigantic caravan site? The Royal Opera House into a bingo hall? The National Theatre into a carpet sale warehouse?
Well, it looks like one, actually.
We gave the architect a knighthood so that nobody would ever say that. Do you want Radio 3 to broadcast pop music 24 hours a day? And how would you feel if they took all the culture programs off television?
I don't know, I never watched them.
Well, neither do I, but it's vital to know that they're there.
But you always said local government was corrupt and incompetent.
Well, so it is, Bernard. So corrupt and incompetent that even ministers recognize it.
So what about next year's Arts Council grant? Are they going to get the extra 30 million?
Oh, my dear Simon, I couldn't disclose the figure in advance, least of all to the managing director of the National Theatre.
Have some of these.
Excuse me.
Only 6? You're not serious.
I'm afraid that's the new diet. 6 breadsticks is the absolute maximum.
Is that gross breadsticks or net breadsticks?
Net breadsticks.
So what are we going to get to the National? Only 1? That's disastrous. How can they expect us to manage on £1.5 million?
I don't know where you got that figure from.
You've got to help me. What can I do?
You mean, if the grant figure, which of course we do not yet know, were to be not merely less than you told the press was the absolute minimum to stave off disaster, but lower even than the real minimum required to stave off disaster?
Yes.
Well, I'm afraid I can't help you, even though I'm on the board. Let me be quite clear about this, Simon. I am here to represent the Prime Minister's interest. Now, there are certain things which would gravely upset him. I must urge you on his behalf not to contemplate them.
Good. What are they?
Well, you'll be making the speech introducing him at the awards dinner. It would be a courtesy to send a draft to number 10 in advance.
For approval?
Well, let's say for information. Now, the Prime Minister is extremely anxious that the speech should not refer to the modesty of the grant increase. There are certain words that he would like you to avoid. Miserly, Philistine, barbarism, skinflint, killjoy. He would also like you to avoid all reference to how much more other countries spend on the arts.
What are the figures?
There you are. To make sure you don't mention them by mistake.
I certainly won't mention them by mistake.
And thirdly, and most important of all, he wants absolutely no comparison between the extra money your theatre needs and certain sums that the government spent last year on certain projects.
Such as?
Well, let's say the figure were to be 4 million, purely as an example, of course. Now, the Prime Minister earnestly hopes that your speech will not refer to the fact that the government spent 5 million on radar equipment for a fighter plane that had already been scrapped. or that the Department of Energy had been able to afford to stockpile 1,000 years' supply of filing tabs, or that another department had stocked up with 1 million tins of Vim, etc., etc., etc.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was delicious.
Yes. He never even goes to the theatre, does he?
Well, he can't really. He's frightened of giving the cartoonist and gossip columnist too much ammunition. You see, he couldn't go to a month in the country for fear of starting rumours about a general election, and he couldn't go to your marvellous production of The Rivals because there'd been so many cabinet ministers after his job, and he couldn't go to the School for Scandal. Well, not after the Education Secretary had been found in bed with that married primary school headmistress. Prime Minister, do forgive me, gentlemen. You remember Simon Monk, don't
Mr.
you?
Monk, yes.
This is very bad news about the grant, Prime Minister.
Surely not, it's gone up.
Nothing like enough.
Well, enough for it to be unnecessary for you to...
I'm afraid not.
Oh, because I was hoping to do something really significant next year. You remember your saying that you had to spend nearly half your grant on the upkeep of the buildings?
Yes.
Well, I have a plan that should relieve you of that.
Really? Oh, that would be marvellous.
Yeah, wouldn't it? And it'd make the National Theatre really national, too.
What do you mean?
I'm thinking of selling the National Theatre.
Selling it?
I knew you'd be pleased. That way we can save $3 million on upkeep.
Prime Minister, this is impossible.
No, it's quite easy, actually. We've had a terrific offer for the site.
But the National Theatre must have a base.
And so it will. You could have inexpensive offices in Brixton or Toxteth. Middlesbrough.
What about the theatres? What about the workshops?
And you could hire them like any other company. Put on your productions in the West End or the Old Vic or the provincial theatres. Become strolling players again instead of civil servants.
Be disastrous.
Oh, surely not. Didn't you say that the theatre was about plays and actors, not bricks and mortar?
Oh, yes, but that was... Look, the National Theatre must have a home.
And so it will. Lots of homes. All the subsidised theatres would be called national theatres. There'd be the National Theatre at Glasgow, the National Theatre at Sheffield, the National Theatre at Bristol, and so on. And that $3 million could help them all. You'd just be the London branch of the National Theatre. I should think that would be very popular with the whole profession.
Barbarism.
What, spending money on actors instead of buildings?
Yes. Well, no.
Anyway, it's just one of my options. I may decide against it, or I may not. I could outline it in my speech, if necessary. It all depends.
On...
Oh, changing the subject, have you decided what you're going to say in your speech yet?
Yes. Not finally.
Because I wondered if those jokes about government waste were really very funny. Of course, it's your decision. I'm sure you understand me.
Mr. Prime Minister, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, pray silence for Simon Monk, Esquire, the Managing Director of the National Theatre.
Mr. Prime Minister, my lords, ladies and gentlemen. You will have read this morning of the grant for the Arts Council and the National Theatre. I know many of us are disappointed by the amount. Of course, we would have all liked it to have been larger, but apparently this is a time of national stringency and we must think in terms of national needs. There are many calls on the public purse. Education, inner cities, health, kidney machines. I think we should be glad that any increase at all has been possible and grateful to our guest of honour whose personal intervention made even this small breadstick possible. Increase. Ladies and gentlemen, to our guest of honour, the patron of the arts, the Prime Minister.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, the toast is...
Excellent speech, don't you think, Humphrey?
The patron of the arts, the Prime Minister.
Yes, Prime Minister.
He can see you now. Sir Humphrey, he's very worried that he seems responsible for something he can't change.
Yes, I'm sure. Responsibility without power, the prerogative of the eunuch throughout the ages.
Good morning, Humphrey. What was that you were saying?
Oh, nothing, Prime Minister. I understand that you're worried about the local education authority.
No, Humphrey, I'm worried about the Department of Education and Science.
Indeed. In my opinion, the DES does a splendid job.
Be that as it may, look what's happened to education in this country. This is a question from a religious studies paper. Which do you prefer, atom bombs or charity? Maths is becoming politicised. If it costs £5 billion a year to maintain Britain's nuclear defences and £75 a year to feed a starving African child, how many African children could be saved from starvation if the Ministry of Defence abandoned nuclear weapons?
That's easy, none. They'd spend it all on conventional weapons. In any case, it's just a sum. 5 billion divided by 75.
But the children aren't learning how to do the sums.
No, indeed, but the local education authorities might argue that they don't need to. They all have pocket calculators.
But they all need to know how it's done. Look, we were all taught basic arithmetic, weren't we?
Were we? What's 3,947 divided by 73?
I'd need a pencil and paper to do that. No, never mind that. I could do it when I left school.
But now you'd use a calculator.
That's not the point. I mean, look at Latin. Hardly anybody knows that nowadays.
Tempora mutanta nos et mutamur in illis. Times change and we change with the times.
Oh, precisely.
Si tacuis es, philosophus mensis es.
What does that mean?
If you'd kept your mouth shut, we might have thought you were clever. Oh, not you, Prime Minister. No, that's the translation.
No one would ever have thought Sir Humphrey was saying that about you.
Go away, Bernard, please.
I can't believe it, Humphrey. You had a conventional, strict academic upbringing. Are you denying the value of it?
Well, what's the use of it? I can't even call upon it in conversation with the Prime Minister of Great Britain.
Education in this country is a disaster. We're supposed to be preparing children for a working life. 3/4 of the time, they're bored stiff.
Well, I should have thought that being bored stiff for 3/4 of the time was an excellent preparation for working life.
The school leaving age was raised to 16 so that they could learn more, and they're learning less.
We didn't raise it to enable them to learn more. We raised it to keep teenagers off the job market and hold down the unemployment figures.
Are you saying there's nothing wrong with education in this country?
No, of course not, Prime Minister. It's a joke. It's always been a joke. And as long as you leave it in the hands of the local councillors, it will remain a joke. I mean, half of them are your enemies anyway, and the other half are the sort of friends who make you prefer your enemies.
Well, what are you saying?
I'm saying that education will never get any better as long as it's subject to all that tomfoolery in the town halls. I mean, just imagine what would happen if you put defence in the hands of the local authorities.
Defence?
Yes, give the local councils 100 million each and ask them to defend themselves. We wouldn't have to worry about the Russians. We'd have a civil war in 3 weeks.
You're just being silly.
Am I, Prime Minister? Well, that's what happened to education. And why? Because nobody thinks that education is serious the way defence is serious.
You mean that's why civil defence is left in the hands of local authorities?
Of course, because everybody knows it's a joke. You just don't leave important matters in the hands of those clowns. And as you've left education to them, one must assume that until now you have attached little importance to it.
I think it's extremely important. It could lose me in the next election.
Ah! In my naivety, I thought you were concerned about the future of our children. You sent for me, Prime
Humphrey,
Minister.
come in. Sit down. I just want to bounce an idea off you. I've realised how to reform the educational system.
Excellent, Prime Minister.
I'm going to let parents take their children away from school and move them to any school they want.
Oh, you mean after application, scrutiny, tribunal hearing and appeals procedures?
No, Humphrey, just move them whenever they want to.
I'm sorry, I don't quite follow.
This government is going to let parents decide which schools to send their children to.
Prime Minister, you can't be serious. But it's preposterous.
Why?
Well, you can't expect parents to make these choices. I mean, how on earth would parents know which schools are best?
Which school did you go to, Humphrey?
Winchester.
Was it good?
Oh, excellent, of course.
Who chose it?
My parents, naturally. Now, that's different, Prime Minister. My parents were discerning people. You can't expect ordinary people to know where to send their children.
Why not?
Well, how could they tell?
Well, they could tell if their kids could read, write, and do sums. They could tell if their neighbours were happy with the school, and they could tell if the exam results were good.
Exam results aren't everything, Prime Minister.
That's true. And those parents who don't want an academic education for their children can choose progressive schools.
But parents have no qualifications to make these choices. I mean, teachers are the professionals. Parents are the worst people to bring up children. They've no qualifications, no training. You don't expect untrained teachers to teach. The same should apply to parents.
You mean before people have children, they should be trained?
No, that's no problem. They've all been trained to have kids. Sex education classes have been standard for some years now.
I see. Well, perhaps we could do better. Before people are allowed to have children, we should make them sit exams, written and practical. Or perhaps both. And then they could be issued with breeding licenses.
Oh, very droll, Prime Minister. No, but I'm being serious. It's looking after children that parents are not qualified for. That's why they have no idea which schools to choose. It couldn't work.
Then how does the health service work? People choose their family doctor without having medical qualifications.
Ah, yes. Well, that's different.
How?
Well, doctors are... Patients aren't parents, dear lady.
Oh, really? What makes you think that, Humpy?
Not as such, in any case. As a matter of fact, I think letting people choose doctors is a very bad idea. Very messy. Much tidier to allocate people to GPs. Much fairer. Then we can even out the numbers and everyone has an equal chance of getting the bad doctors.
See?
In any case, we're not talking about health, we're talking about education. And with respect, Prime Minister, I think that the DES will react with some caution to your rather novel proposal.
You mean they'll block it?
I mean they will give it the most serious and urgent consideration and insist on a thorough and rigorous examination of all the proposals, allied to a detailed feasibility study and budget analysis, before producing a consultative document for consideration by all interested bodies and seeking comments and recommendations to be included in a brief for a series of working parties who will produce individual studies which will provide the background for a more wide-ranging document considering whether or not the proposal should be taken forward to the next stage.
You mean they'll block it?
Yep.
Come in, Humphrey.
Prime Minister, I want to talk to you about Prime Minister's question.
Thank you. I accept your congratulations. Wasn't I brilliant? Didn't you think so?
Well, I wasn't there, but...
Wasn't I brilliant, Bernard?
Well, I believe your replies this afternoon will not be quickly forgotten.
Let me tell you what happened, Humphrey. The first question was about that Home Office cock-up over the shortage of prison officers. My reply was masterly. I said, I refer the Honourable Member to the speech I made in this House on October the 28th.
Did he remember what you'd said?
Well, no, of course not. Neither did I, come to that. Still, it shut him up. The next one was about unemployment and whether the Department of Employment fiddled the figures.
You mean periodically restructure the base from which the statistics have been derived without drawing public attention to the fact?
Exactly, fiddle the figures.
Well, of course they do.
I know they do. But I said I'd found no significant evidence of it.
That's because you haven't been looking.
And because we haven't shown you.
I know, well done, Humphrey. Then we went straight on to a googly about the Department of Energy's plans for disposing of nuclear waste. The question was trying to get me to admit that the Cabinet was divided.
Well, it is.
Well, I know that. So I said, my Cabinet took a unanimous decision.
That's only because you threatened to dismiss anyone who wouldn't agree.
I certainly made them agree unanimously. By this time, my backbenchers were cheering my every word. Oh, yes, then we had a question about why, since we'd spent so much money on it, our new anti-missile missile was scrapped as obsolete the day before the first one came off the production line.
And how did you wriggle out of that one?
Wriggled out? That was my masterstroke. My reply, Humphrey, was sheer genius. I simply said our policy had not been as effective as we hoped. Clearly, we had got it wrong.
You admitted that?
Yeah, brilliant, wasn't it? Took the wind right out of his sails. Honesty always gives you the advantage of surprise in the House of Commons.
There was actually a supplementary. The Prime Minister was asked when he would request the resignation from the responsible minister.
Too easy. I said I'll ask for his resignation when he makes a mistake that could have been seen at the time and not with the benefit of hindsight. They were on their feet, cheering, stamping, waving their order papers.
I gather that there was a question about the bugging of an MP's telephone.
Oh, yes, I got a terrific laugh with that. I said...
I know, Bernard told me.
No, I said, much as I respect...
Yes, I know, Bernard told me.
Oh, well, anyway, that was just stupid. I mean, why should we bug Hugh Halifax's telephone? I mean, one of my own administration. Don't know where they got such a daft idea. Sheer paranoia.
Yes, the only thing is...
I mean, why should we listen to MPs? Boring, stupid, ignorant windbags? I do my best not to listen to them. But he's only a PPS. I have enough trouble finding out what's going on at the Ministry of Defence. What could he know?
So I gather you denied that Mr. Halifax's phone had been bugged.
Well, obviously. It was the one question today to which I could give a clear, simple, straightforward, honest answer.
Yes. Unfortunately, although the answer was indeed clear, simple, and straightforward, there is some difficulty in justifiably assigning to it the fourth of the epithets you applied to the statement. Inasmuch as the precise correlation between the information you communicated and the facts, insofar as they can be determined and demonstrated, is such as to cause epistemological problems of sufficient magnitude as to lay upon the logical and semantic resources of the English language a heavier burden than they can reasonably be expected to bear.
Epistemological? What are you talking about?
You told a lie.
A lie?
A lie.
What do you mean, a lie?
I mean, you lied. Yes, I know this is a difficult concept to get across to a politician. Yes, you did not tell the truth.
You mean we are bugging Hugh Halifax's telephone?
We were.
We were? When did we stop?
17 minutes ago. But even separating out the component causes, let alone allocating responsibility for them, is a task of such analytical delicacy as not to be susceptible of compression within the narrow confines of a popular radio program.
Humphrey Appleby, thank you very much.
If that was a popular program, what would an unpopular program be like?
Thank you very much, Sir Humphrey.
Absolutely splendid. My pleasure. Thank you. Was I all right?
Well, couldn't you have said a bit more, especially about unemployment?
Such as?
Well, the truth. Why do you laugh?
Oh, my dear Ludo, nobody tells the truth about unemployment.
Oh, why not?
Well, because everybody knows you could halve it in a few weeks.
But how?
Cut off all social security to any claimant who refuses 2 job offers. There's genuine unemployment in the north, but the south of England is awash with layabouts, many of them graduates, living off the dole and housing benefit, plus quite a lot of cash they pick up without telling anybody.
Oh, you mean moonlighting?
Well, sunlighting, really. Most employers will tell you they're short-staffed, but offer the unemployed a street-sweeping job or a dishwashing job, they'd be off the register before you could say parasite. Frankly, this country can have as much unemployment as it's prepared to pay for in Social Security, and no politicians have got the guts to do anything about it.
Oh, I do wish you'd said that.
I'm sure you do. Oh, come along, Bernard, come on.
Sorry. What's this for?
The BBC have just sent me this tape. Apparently it's part of my interview. They say it's particularly interesting.
Your interview?
You sound surprised that I should have said something interesting, Bernard.
Oh, no, Sir Humphrey. It's just that I thought you intended to say nothing, as always. I mean...
Switch it on, Bernard. You may learn something. My dear Ludo, nobody tells the truth about unemployment.
Oh? Why not?
Because everyone knows you could halve it in a few months. Cut off all Social Security to all claimants who refuse 2 job offers. And no politicians have got the guts to do anything about it.
Sir Humphrey, that wasn't you, was it?
Yes, Bernard.
But how could you say such things? Is there any more?
Yes, Bernard.
As damaging as what we've just heard?
more damaging. I believe I referred to parasites.
How could you be so indiscreet?
The interview was over. We were just chatting harmlessly.
Harmless?
It was off the record.
It was on the tape.
Oh, my God, I've just realized. Blackmail.
Blackmail?
Read that.
Here is a copy of your off-the-record part of the radio interview. We found it very interesting. We will contact you shortly.
What do they want of me, Bernard?
The BBC? License fee up 50%?
Maybe it's a private blackmail by the producer.
Well, maybe.
Doesn't he know I'm a poor man?
Maybe he hasn't read you live in abject poverty on 81,000 a year.
Bernard, what am I going to do?
Well, keep your mouth shut in future.
And so must you, Bernard. I don't want you to breathe a word about this to anyone. Anyone, do you
Monsieur,
hear?
my duty to the...
Bernard, I will... Oh, Bernard, what am I going to do?
Well, perhaps you should put out a press statement expressing sympathy for the unemployed. Well, you may be joining them any moment.